that are promoting also our channel and sending it, because some of these studies are very important, well, all the studies are very important. So we want to welcome each and every one of you, and we're preparing for Passover. Passover is coming. Now, we don't know when Passover is, as I'm going to say, but we need to start right now preparing for Passover, preparing for what we call the Passover Seder. Now, we don't do a Korban Pesach, sacrifice of Passover anymore. The last Korban Pesach, or the last Passover sacrifice, was in 70 AD, 70 of the Common Era, and that was the last time when the temple was destroyed. Since then, we haven't had a lamb sacrificed, and so we do not do any sacrificial lambs anymore, but we do a memorial feast, a memorial meal, and we want to teach each of you men, heads of household, how to do a memorial meal. And of course, that memorial meal is a memorial of redemption. And first of all, the redemption from Egypt, that our ancestors were exited, were taken out of Egypt by the mighty hand of Adonai. And also, it's a prophetic lesson of Messiah. Yeshua is our Passover lamb. And of course, it's a teaching for the next generation. Passover, and I mentioned this several times in the past, but I remember one Passover that we had, there was some of the kids were getting rambunctious, as they always do, especially at night. And one of the older person says, next year when we do Passover, let's have a Passover without kids. Wait a second. Passover is about the children. It's about the next generation. When your children ask you, what does this ritual mean? You will tell them. And so the telling is called the Haggadah. So we want to teach every one of you men, what is the Haggadah? What is the telling? What do you tell your children? What audio-visual lessons with the cups, with the bread, with the shank bone today, which is a reminder of the lamb that was sacrificed back then. And so we want every one of you to start preparing for Passover and learning what is the date of Passover. How do we determine that date? Spiritual preparations, which we'll do in a second here. The Moedim, what are the Moedim? What are the appointed days of Adonai? What are his feasts? The spring feasts, which are important, the Passover Seder, and again, the proposed dates. Now, the biblical date of Passover is dependent on the turn of the year. The turn of the year is in spring. The turn of the year is always when the year turns, and we call it astronomically the equinox. So when the equinox happens, the barley in Jerusalem in Israel is in Aviv, meaning that it's a green in its green years, ready to go, and the crescent moon shows up, and that will be the biblical New Year. So we're waiting for the equinox. Now, this year, the proposed time of Passover, if everything goes okay, according to the moon, if we see the crescent moon after the equinox, it'll be in April, late April. But how many of you know when is Easter? Anybody know when Easter is? Easter is March 31st. Oops. Easter is March 31st, and Passover is late April. Now, it could still come here depending on the moon, but we're proposing that it might be late April. That means that this year, Easter, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, is going to be 1 month before, celebrated 1 month before, almost a month before, he actually resurrected. Something's wrong. The calendars are wrong. Sometimes the Jewish calendar is wrong. Sometimes the Christian calendar is wrong. This year the Christian calendar is wrong. Sometimes both of those are wrong. That's why we must look at the equinox, the Barlin Aviv, and the crescent moon. These are the three indicators of when the new year starts, the biblical new year, Rosh Hashanah, and the 14th day after that day, between the two eves, the two evenings, which is the time of the Passover celebration. Again, today we have rabbinic and church calendars, but when Messiah returns, we'll go back to the biblical calendar, the sighted moon calendar. And many of us are already doing that, which I would encourage pastors and rabbis that are not on the sighted moon calendar, and they're using either the Christian or rabbinic calendar, to start studying about the sighted moon calendar and being able to start doing it, and what we would call start practicing up. Our spiritual preparations, an obedient heart we want to have. And again, these should be every day, not just for Passover, but now that Passover is coming, this is a pointer. This is a symbol. Say, hey, we need to, again, go back. A faithful heart, a humble heart, a repentant heart, a forgiving heart, and an accountable heart. So just start looking at yourself, looking at where you're at, and start preparing a spiritual, not just, oh, I need to go get tablecloths. What do we need here? We need cups. We need this. We're going to have a roast, or we're going to have chicken, or we're going to have this or that. But just start looking at it from a spiritual point of view. And of course, we don't know when Rosh Hashanah is going to be. Someplace in March. Maybe early April. We though that's still unknown. On the 10th of the first month, 10 days after, is the selection of the lamb. Then the 14th day after that is Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Breads, the Feast of First Fruits, counting the Omer, and the Feast of Weeks, or Pentecost. We don't know any of those dates. Now again, if you look at a Christian calendar or a Jewish calendar, they'll tell you when these things are. But we don't go by the Christian or Jewish calendar. We'll go by the sighted moon calendar. So, especially if you are new, you haven't been a believer for a while, a long time, you've never even heard about what I'm talking about, you're welcome to come and study with us. And over the internet, you could always ask questions, and we would be happy to answer those questions. Well, today is a double Parsha. If you remember last week, I only went halfways in Kitesa. So today we're going to do part 2 of Kitesa, a very important teaching on the golden calf. And then Vayak'hel, which is, and he assembled. So these are the 2 parashot for today. And let's start with Kitesa. And that was when you elevate. And it begins with the apostasy of Israel with the golden calf. Now, let's catch up on the scenario here. What happens is Israel arrives in Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb. And they arrive there, and Moses goes up 2-3 days, several times up and down the mountain to talk to Adonai and to tell the people, talk to Adonai, talk to the people, talk to Adonai. And when he was downstairs, in a sense, Adonai from the mountaintop with thunder and lightning and the sound of the shofar, and Adonai spoke what we call the 10 Commandments, spoke the 10 Commandments to Israel. And as he spoke the 10 Commandments, they heard his voice, and they were so afraid that they told Moses, do not let Adonai talk to us anymore. You be the intermediary. And at that point, he became the permanent intermediary. And so he goes up the mountain, and Adonai tells him to write the 10 Commandments, which is the covenant, in a scroll, in like our scrolls here. And he writes them, and then he reads it to the people. And then after that, Adonai says, come up the mountain so that I could give you the same covenant in stone. In stone. And so he goes up and spends 40 days up there. And in those 40 days, Adonai is giving him not only the 10 Commandments, but he's giving him everything about you're going to build the tabernacle, and this is the way you're going to build it. And he gives him the blueprints and everything. And after 40 days, Moses comes down. And here's where we begin. Exodus 32:1. When the people saw that Moshe delayed to come down from the mountain, and again, 40 days up there, the people assembled about Aaron and said to him, come, make us an Elohim, make us a God who will go before us. As for this man Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. We don't know what happened. ¿Qué pasó con él? Se perdió. He got lost. He died. They didn't know what was happening. He was receiving not only the covenant in written form, 10 Commandments, but he was receiving all the plans for the tabernacle, the Mishkan also. Then all the people tore off their gold rings, which were in their ears, and brought them to Aaron. And he took this from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made it into a molten calf. And they said, this is your Elohim, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. Now when Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, tomorrow shall be a feast to Yahweh. Now, interesting. Now, the Hebrews had known idolatry in Egypt. They were probably, as they made a lot of the stonework there in Egypt, a lot of the buildings that they made, much of that were statues. And as you go to Egypt even today, to some of these cities, Memphis, Giza, all these places, the statues are still there. And the pharaohs, the old pharaohs, and you go to, of course, the pyramids, and all these places have gods. They knew about the gods of Egypt, the idolatry. And one of the things that Egypt always, they worshipped animals, not only the pharaoh, the sun, the stars, but animals. And they were part of their gods. So when Moses, now remember, Moses had taught about Yahweh. He had taught about Adonai. He had taught, and many of the people knew and followed. But this tells us that within the people, there was a mixed multitude, not only of Hebrews, but of other nations, and probably many of the Hebrews themselves were not 100% right with Adonai. And so they were what we would call backslidden. And this is definitely a backslidden situation of them. And they said, make us a God that will lead us. Our Elohim is invisible. Ha'elohut is invisible. He has no substance that is touchable, observable. But the idols, the gods of Babylon, Egypt, the gods of all the nations are made of wood, of stone. They were made of things that perish and break. And yet that's what the people wanted. They wanted a statue. Today, people are still into statues. They say, we believe in Jesus. And then they have a statue of Jesus. That's idolatry. That's not to be had. And then they have statues of his mother, Yeshua's mother, and of the apostles, and all kinds of different, even people that never existed. Saint Christopher, which never existed. All these saints that never existed. Many of them were gods in the Greco-Roman pantheon. And so they wanted something. They wanted an idol. And very much a lot of people even today they still, it's like people need something to look at, something to, focus their physical life on. Well, it's not the physical that we need to look at. It's deep within our heart, deep within there, that we long, that we yearn for our Elohim. It's from deep within that we praise, that we worship, that we give him our all to Adonai, which we cannot see. And if we were to ever see him, we would die. And so that's what they wanted. They give Aaron their gold earrings, all the stuff that they had, and he fashions it into an idol. Now, most of the pictures that we have, I couldn't find any pictures that were of small idols. Most of the pictures we have are of big idols. But remember, in the ancient world, not only did people have statues of their gods that were big, but most people had smaller statues. Just like you go to some churches and they have these big giant monster statues. They have, I think, where is it, in Brazil, they have that big giant statue of their Jesus. But they also have little ones. They even have little plastic ones for your dashboard, right? Remember? I think there's even a book called about the dashboard Jesus that people have for good luck charms type thing, or like that. They won't get in a wreck or whatever. And so I'm sure this one probably wasn't that big because it was their earrings. And then it says he fashioned it with a tool. So he melted the gold, and then with an engraver's tool, he fashioned it into a calf. Now, the calf worship was very big in Egypt. And what he says about this, tomorrow we will have a feast, a chag. The word there is chag. Just like Chag Sukkot or Chag Hamatzah. We'll have a feast, a celebration in honor of Yahweh. So they wanted a statue. They wanted something. And what they wanted was a calf, a golden calf. And that's what was made, a golden calf. But look at this. This golden calf was given the name Yahweh. And he says, tomorrow we're going to have a celebration, a chag, a feast for Yahweh. And Yahweh was represented by a calf. Not only is that idolatry, the idols, according to Paul, idols are demons. Demons are what's in the idol. The kachina dolls. All these dolls and things that here are so present in New Mexico, Arizona, and the Southwest here, and others, the trolls, and all kinds, all nations of the world have some kind of an effigy of their gods and their spirits. And these are, like in the kachinas, or in some of these, there's the kachina of the mountain, the kachina of the river, the kachina of the bull. And all these are demonic. So, by the way, if you have any, just make sure you burn them. If you have any, regardless of the cost, however they cost you, some of them are in the thousands, burn them, get rid of them. And so what they do is they offer incense to these, or they do sacrifices to these. And so just like these statues of Jesus, that's not Jesus. This cow is not Yahweh. That's not our master. That's not our Adonai. They were using that. And these people use all kinds of things, what we would call false Jesuses, false Yeshuas. Another Yeshua, like Paul says in 2 Corinthians. They're following another Yeshua, not the Yeshua that I gave you, Paul says, but they're following. Do not follow other Yeshuas. Because in Paul's time, people were already starting to follow different ideas or different forms of the true Yeshua, the true Holy Spirit, the true gospel. There was variant gospels at that time. And so here is a picture of them giving honor, burning incense and sacrifices to the golden calf. Early the next morning, they sacrificed burnt offerings and brought communion sacrifices. The people then sat down to eat and drink, and afterwards they got up to amuse themselves. And so what they did is they had these sacrifices, communion sacrifices. Now, a burnt offering, a Holocaust offering, is when you get an animal, a lamb, usually a lamb, baby lamb, and you sacrifice it, and then you put the whole lamb, everything, on the altar, and it burns completely. It just burns it up. A communion sacrifice is where you offer this meat, this lamb, to Adonai. And we'll learn more about that in coming weeks when we start studying Leviticus. But then parts of it goes to the officiating priest. Parts of it go to the people, and you have a communion meal. The word communion, to have communion, means that you have a meal together with your friends. When people have an anniversary meal, you go to the restaurant, you're having this special meal, that would be a communion meal. When you have family over, every Thanksgiving meal is a communion meal where you have common union with this group of people. And you eat. In those days, you would bring the sacrifice to the temple. The priest would offer it, give portion to Adonai, portions to the priests, Levites, and then give the rest to you, and you take it home, and then you would roast it, and then you would eat with the people that you would invite. And so that's what they did. But afterwards, after they did these sacrifices, then they sat down to eat, to drink, and then to amuse themselves. Now, the word amuse, because of mixed company, we know what that means, and it became immoral, an immoral time for them. At that time, Moshe is upstairs, Moshe is up there receiving the Ten Commandments and the directions for the tabernacle and all that. And Yahweh and Moshe have a talk up there. Turn with me to chapter 32. Chapter 32 here in Exodus. And I want you to see something here. And this is a very telling thing. In 32:7, chapter 32, verse 7, then Yahweh spoke to Moses, "Go down now, because your people whom you brought out of Egypt have apostatized." So Adonai gives Moshe a warning. They have apostatized. Apostasy is different than backsliding. To backslide means that you are still a believer. You're still a believer, but you're, in a sense, gone back to the world. You're still a believer, but you're doing things that should not be doing. And when you backslide, all you need to do is repent. If you acknowledge, if you confess your sin, then he is faithful and just to forgive you your sin and cleanse you from unrighteousness. So there is this idea of return, come back. When you backslide, you could come back. When you apostatize, you can't come back. When you commit apostasy, you become an unbeliever by an act of your will. You will not follow Yahweh, you will follow this. And in what they were doing now is they stopped just by doing this. They stopped following Yahweh, and they started following and giving their hearts to this idol, to this demonic spirit behind the effigy. Now, not everyone did that. We will see how many did that. Of course, this was a backsliding for Aaron. He was actually backsliding in doing what he did. He never apostatized, but many did. Not everyone apostatized. So watch what Adonai says. In verse 8, they have been quick to leave the way, Chaderech, that I marked out for them. They have made themselves a calf of molten metal and have worshipped it and offered its sacrifice. Here is your Elohim, Israel, they have cried, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. Yahweh said to Moshe, I can see how headstrong, stiff-necked these people are. Leave me now. My wrath shall blaze out against them and devour them. Of you, though, I will make a great nation. So Adonai says, I am just going to get rid of the whole lot. And of you, or the way it is you all, of his family and that group of people that are faithful with Moses, of you all, I will make a great nation. So all the backsliders and all the apostates are to be destroyed. But Adonai is ready to start a new nation out of Moshe, his sons, Aaron, and that family. But here is one of the most important lessons that we could learn: the intercession of Moshe. And every one of us should be an intercessor. Every one of us should intercess to Yahweh. And watch what Moses says. But Moshe pleaded with Yahweh, his Elohim. Yahweh, he said, why should your wrath blaze out against the people of whom you brought out of the land of Egypt? And he's pleading with him and asking Adonai, Do not do this. Do not devour them. Do not, let not your wrath. And what's interesting is that it says there in verse 14, so Yahweh relented and did not bring on his people the disaster he had threatened. Many times Adonai threatens through his word, if you do this, I'm going to do that. With David did a lot of sins that he should have been killed for. Adonai should have taken his life for. In fact, in this room, how many would not be here if Adonai had not relented? Maybe through your asking forgiveness for your sin, maybe through someone interceding for you, your mother interceding, a loved one interceding, your husband, your wife interceding, and disaster was averted, and a chance to return, a chance to come back was given. And so Adonai says, you know what? I'm going to give him a chance. I'm going to not bring because of your intercession. By the way, it is in Ezekiel 22:30 there. Ezekiel 22:30, where Adonai is always looking. Adonai was going to bring disaster on Israel, on Judah. And Adonai was going to bring this disaster on the land. He's going to destroy the land because they were in apostasy. They were in sin. They were worshiping false. In fact, they were worshiping Easter, the Queen of Heaven. They were making what we call today hot cross buns and offering these cakes to the Queen of Heaven. They were getting on what we call Easter Sunday morning. They would get there on a Sunday, and they would face with their backs, even the priests, their backs against the temple, against the sanctuary. And as the sun came up over the Mount of Olives, the sun comes up over the Mount of Olives, and of course the temple was gold, and as the sun comes up, they were bowing down to the sun and worshiping the sun on that day. Adonai relents. We blow it. We worship false gods. We worship idols. We do this and we do that. Plead for yourself. Plead for your family. Father, forgive my son. Forgive my daughter. Bring him back, Adonai. Plead with Adonai. Plead. And Yahweh relents. And Yahweh says, okay, I won't take their life. Now, Adonai did this, and he relented. But one of the things that we have is as Moses comes down, and he could have just wiped these people out. As he comes down, all of a sudden, Adonai had warned him, the people are apostatizing. They're doing this, and that. And as he's coming down, it is Joshua. It says, oh, there's a sound of celebration down there. They're having a good time. They're okay. And, of course, Moses says, this is no song of victory. This is a sound. It's not a lament for defeat, this sound, but chanting. Answering chanting, I hear. What's answering chanting? Answering chanting is when someone says something and then another group of people do a refrain. In the Psalms, you have these answering chants where someone chants something and then someone else gives another refrain. And they were doing that for the golden calf. And so Moses comes down and he gets the 2 tablets of stone and he throws them down and smashes them on the ground in front of all the people in front of Aaron. And of course, there's an exchange there between Moses and Aaron. There's an exchange. And Adonai really, through Moshe, comes down on Aaron. And this is one of the reasons Aaron also died before his time and wasn't able to enter into the promised land. Sometimes Adonai forgives, but he also disciplines. If he were to destroy Aaron and the whole lot, that'd be something else. But Adonai forgave those that did not apostatize, those that just backslid, like Aaron, but there was consequences. And many times Adonai forgives us for the sin that we've brought on ourselves, but sometimes there's consequences that we have to pay later. And of course, he comes again and tells them what happened. And Aaron says, well, the people told me. You know, remember, Aaron was called to be a priest of Adonai. He says, well, the people told me. He was in the second in command here. He was left there. And the people told me. Well, a leader is not supposed to follow the people. The people are supposed to follow the leader. But he followed the people. And then he says, well, I took their gold, and so I said to them, verse 24, who has gold? And they took it off and brought it to me. I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. I threw it in the fire, out came this calf. Remember what he had said earlier? Give me your gold and all this. And he engraved it. He made it into an effigy. But now he says, it's almost like if someone has a gun and points it at someone else, cocks it, and then afterwards says, well, it just fired by itself. Have you ever heard that one? And that's what happened here. Oh, I put through the gold in the fire, and what happened? Out came this calf. And of course, that I don't know if that would be a tall tale or what you would call that, or what those guys do. But at this point, one of the things that we have is we have the zeal of the Levites. Now remember, Moses and Aaron were from the tribe of Levi. They were Levites. And because they were, again, primos with Moses, these were Moses' primos, when it came to bring a judgment, he says, who is on the side of Yahweh? Those of you that are on the side of Yahweh, come to me. And all the Levites, and some others too, but all the Levites came to him. And then he tells the Levites, this is what you do. Go to every one of you, even if it's your brother, your neighbor, and every apostate, everyone that is not repenting, everyone that apostatized, he says, go and take their life. So the Levites grabbed their swords. He says, grab your sword. They were all armed, by the way. They left with arms out of Egypt, and they were well armed. And so all the Levites took their arms, their swords, and they killed every apostate. And it says there that there was 3,000 in verse 28. It says there was 3,000 men perished that day. 3,000 men. Of course, we don't know how many women. It never counts the women, what they do, positive or negative. But we know that Adonai judged 3,000 men on this day. And what Moshe also did is he got the golden calf, and they grinded it down, mixed it with water, And all these people were to drink that gold into their system. Of course, that brought about also their death. And from this event, from what the Levites did, we have what we call the investiture as priests. Because of this act of their bravery, of their standing for Yahweh, Adonai says, from now on, you're going to be my priests. You see, before this time, the priests were the oldest, the firstborn, was always a priest. Every of you firstborn males, if we're living in the time before this day, you would be the priest of your home. You would be the priest of your family. You would become the patriarch, and you would be, and all the firstborn sons would be trained to be a priest and to do sacrifices and to do all the different things that were done in the ancient world for their false gods or for Yahweh, as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And from this time on, the Levites are investitured as priests and as the servants of the priests. The high priest will always be a Levite. All priests are Levites, but not all Levites are priests. And Adonai orders them to depart. Of course, it's going to take some time. They need to get out of there, start building the Mishkan, and start getting ready to leave. Moshe's tent of meeting. One of the things that we come up here, and sometimes this little thing is passed over, but it says Moses used to take the tent and pitch it outside the camp, a good distance from the camp, and he called it the Ochel Moed, the tent of meeting. And it came about that everyone who sought Yahweh would go out to the Ochel Moed, and Yahweh would speak with Moshe. Okay, this is before the Mishkan was built. Now, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, became the tent of meeting. But what a lot of people do is they make this Ohel Moed and the tabernacle to be the same thing. These are two different tents. This one is Moshe's tent. And this tent is where some of the things were stored at before everything was built over here on the big one. Now, when the big one was built and it was set up and started out on the wilderness, this Ohel Moed wasn't there no more. And so this is a separate tent of meeting. So sometimes people say, well, wait a second, it says the tent of meeting is this, but then it says over there, this one is outside the camp. The tabernacle, Ohel Moed, was in the middle of the camp, if you remember, with all the tribes. We're going to see, in fact, the tribes were like a cross with the smallest number of tribal members on the top. The two sides were equal numbers, and the bottom was along. So from the top of the mountain, and you look over, the Ohel Moed, the Mishkan, was in the middle, and then the lights of the tents would form an actual cross. Interesting. Then in 33:18, then he said, please show me your kavod. Show me your glory. Now, I want to make sure that we hit on this point, because the word glory in Hebrew is kavod. Can everybody say with me, kavod? Kavod. And this is the glory. This is the glory of Adonai. His presence, his light, his shine. This is his glory. And Moshe asked Adonai, show me, please. Show me your glory, your kavod. Yahweh said, I shall make all my goodness pass before you, and before you I shall pronounce my name Yahweh. And I am gracious to those whom I am gracious, and I take pity on those whom I take pity. But my face, he said, you cannot see. For no human being can see, no man, no person can see me and survive. And Yahweh said, here is a place near me. You will stand on the rock, on the cleft of the rock. And when my kavod, when my glory passes by, I shall put you in the cleft of the rock and shield you with my hand until I have gone past. And later on, Adonai actually does this, where all of a sudden his kavod, his glory passes, and Moshe is there in the cleft of the rock, and Adonai does not show him his face. And this is the Father's face. Of course, Adonai, Yahweh, the pre-incarnate Yeshua, has shown Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, and Joshua his face. But we're talking about the Father here. And then what happens is the covenant was broken. Think of this. Moses had the covenant, received the covenant in audible, in written, and in 2 stone tablets. And the stone tablets were broken. And Adonai says, now Moses, because you broke the first set, I'm going to renew the covenant. I'm going to repeat the covenant. Cut 2 tablets. Now, interesting, the first ones were done by Adonai. Now Moses had to cut 2 tablets of stone like the first ones and come up to the mountain, and I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets which you broke. Now, interestingly enough, now we not only have a second set. In fact, if you were to find the real Mount Sinai, which I don't know where it is, there's 4 or 5 places that people have said this is the real Mount Sinai. We don't know which one it is. And we're to look where this altar was, maybe we would find pieces, broken pieces of the original stones. But a second set of stones were made. And Moses goes up a second time. And for another 40 days. So now he's out there 80 plus days with all the times he went up and down. But Adonai also told him to write another set of writings, another 10 commandments. And he gives them to Moshe. Now, if you look at the second set of 10 commandments, you'll say, wait a second, are there 2 different commandments? 2 different sets? Or is it the same set, but Adonai took, like, don't murder, don't adultery. He took those out and added some others. And then I want you to see this. Yahweh appears. And here's where he comes, and comes in 34:5 and passes by. And he sees his kavod. He sees the glory. The covenant is renewed. Here, watch what Adonai says. Look, I am now making a covenant. Well, wait a second. He already made the covenant. Is he renewing the covenant? Is he rewriting it? Is he saying something else? I am now making a covenant. I shall work such wonders at your head of your whole people as never been worked in any other country or nation. And all the people around you will see what Yahweh can do. For what I shall do through you will be awe-inspiring. Mark then what I command you today. Mark then what I command you today. Or right now, mark. Now, he received the second set. This is an alternate, maybe a duplicate, maybe something else. Now, in Exodus 34:12 to 26, we have another set of 10. But this set of 10 is different than the first set of 10. And interesting enough, in most commentaries or most teachings on this Parsha, I have not found anybody who gives this second set. Now the second set, he says, I'm going to make a covenant. Mark what I'm going to tell you. Take care that you don't make a pact with inhabitants of the country. The biggest one is that don't mess around with inhabitants of the country you're going to. You know, you're to cut down their stones, their idols. You're to do this. When you go into the land of Canaan, break every idol. And when Joshua went in, and archaeologically we see evidence of this, where the Israelites go to all these different cities. And from that era, you have all these burnt areas. You have all these statues that have been torn down. And it says, you will not cast a metal Elohim for yourself. Observe the feast of unleavened bread for 7 days. For 6 days you will labor, 7th day you will rest. Observe the feast of weeks, first fruits, ingathering. 3 times a year all your menfolk shall appear before Adonai Yahweh. You will not offer the blood of my sacrificial victim with unleavened bread. And you will bring the best of your first fruits. You will not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Notice that this set of 10 is different than the original 10 commandments given on the mountain audibly, given by having it written in a scroll, given by the first set of commandments, given by the second set of commandments. These are what I would call something akin to, here we have a constitution, here we have the Bill of Rights. And so it is like an addendum. I would call it an addendum of 10 other things. And again, this where it says, you shall not boil a kid in his mother's milk. I'm sure someone will ask the question, is that why some Orthodox Jews do not mix meat and dairy together? And they get it from this verse. But that's not what it's saying, not to. You can eat meat and dairy together biblically. They don't do it, but this was an occultic thing. This was a pagan ritual. So if you're going to offer a kid a baby goat, and you're going to offer that, and you're going to offer it to a false god, and you kill the baby goat, don't get the mother's milk and boil the little goat in the mother's milk and offer it to your false god. Don't do that. Nobody, okay? No, don't do that. That's pagan. Don't do that. But can you eat a cheeseburger? Of course. Can you eat a chicken sandwich with cheese? Of course. Because the milk and the meat, the milk and the cheese did not come from the chicken. Make sure you guys get that. Okay. Moshe, again, comes down from the mountain the second time. And he's told to put the words into writing. These are the terms of the covenant. And on the tablets, he wrote the words of the covenant. This was the second set, like the original. And Moses came down from the mountain with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hands. As he was coming down the mountain, Moses did not know that the skin of his face was radiant because he had been talking to him. So the kavod of Adonai, some of that kavod, now glistened on Moses' face. And now the kavod, and what Moses would do is when he'd go out with the people, he'd actually have to put something in front, a veil. He had to put a veil so that the people would not have to shut their eyes because his face was radiant. That was part 1. And here is Vayak'hel. And on this one, there are 6 teachings in this Parsha. We're going to look at the first 2 here today because, again, the rest of it is going to be taught by Elder Jim Bibb. And be praying for Elder Jim Bibb. He was rear-ended, and we're praying for you, Jim, and pray for him that everything goes good there, that any concussions or anything like that would be healed completely, so he could come. He actually has an actual model of the temple, and he's going to come and give us a whole teaching on this. So we're going to do the first 2 parts today. Exodus 35:1, and Moses assembled the whole Adat synagogue of the sons of Israel and said, these are the things Yahweh has ordered to be done. Now it says, and he assembled Moses. The word to assemble is the word kahal. In fact, I'll do the pointer to it right there. I don't know if it could be seen on the screen, but here is the pointer. And Vayak'hel, and he called. Kahal means to call, and he called. When you call, you assemble. The whole Adat. The word Adat means the community or the congregation. And that's the Hebrew word, Adat. The Greek translation here is the word synagogue. So an Adat is a synagogue. We are right now an Adat. We are Adat here. We are a community. We're also a synagogue. We're a gathering. In Greek, this would be a synagogue, a gathering together. This is the Septuagint word for it. Of the sons of Israel, and said, these are the things Yahweh has ordered. So he gives another list of things that Adonai has ordered. Now, there you see the word synagogue of Israel in Greek, in Hebrew and Greek. So an assembly, an adat, a synagogue are all different words for the same thing. The common word for Israel gathered is kahal, the assembly in the wilderness. Right now we are a kehilah. We are in assembly. We are a group of people. The Greek word for kahal is ekklesia. Ekklesia. The word ekklesia is made up of 2 Greek words, ek, which means out of, and kaleo. Kaleo is to call. So it means to call out or to assemble. So the Hebrew and Greek words mean the same thing. In Acts 7:38, Stephen, in talking about the Kahal Israel, the Adat Israel, calls it the ecclesia in the wilderness. Of course, the King James Version uses the word here, the church in the wilderness. It is the King James Bible, we're going to see, that popularized the word church. The word kahal in the wilderness is the kahal in the Bamidbar, the wilderness. And so, of course, Yeshua says, I will build my ecclesia, my kahal. See, the church was not born in Pentecost. The Kehillah was not born in Pentecost. The Kahal was not born in Pentecost. This is the people of Adonai. The Kahal, the Ecclesia, the Adat is the people of Adonai, his community. It just transferred from all Israel to include Gentiles. And at Pentecost, the whole Adat, the whole ecclesia, the whole kehillah was Jewish at the time, Israelite, Hebrew. Later on with Cornelius, the first Gentile, is now grafted into this kahal. The kahal is called the olive tree of Israel in Jeremiah 11 and in Romans 11. And both of those scriptures talk about the olive tree of Israel being the kahal, the kehillah. The origin of the word church means a circle. The Old English word cirque, where we get the word not only a circle, a rodeo, would be the Spanish word for a church, el rodeo, and the old English word would be a circus. So you could say, I'm going to circus. I've been to some of those, have you? John Wycliffe is the one that first translated the word in 1382, and he's the first one to use the Latin word ecclesiam from the Greek word ecclesia into churche, the old English spelling. And of course, King James II, who was a Freemason, authorized his own translation in 1611, and he demanded that the word church be used along, and he also brought in Easter and James, and Stonehenge is a church. Stonehenge is the most famous church circle, a religious body of gathering, and they were all in circles. And so they got the pagan term for one of their structures and brought it into. But the word church is not the building, whether it's a circle, square, or whatever. The body of Messiah is us, the people. These are the things to be ordered. The first order. For 6 days work may be done, but the seventh day you shall have a holy day, a Sabbath of rest. Shabbat, Shabbaton. A Shabbaton is a time of rest. A Shabbat, Shabbaton to Yahweh. And this is what's important. The Sabbath is not for you. You will cease from your labor on that day, but the purpose of ceasing from your labor is not so that you could it's for Yahweh. It's to give yourself to Yahweh on that day. And so on that day, yes, you will rest. You will cease from your labor. Yes, you will do activities that bring peace and comfort to you. And you will not go out buying or selling or making somebody else buy or sell. But you will rest on that day to Yahweh, for Yahweh. And of course, Leviticus 23 tells us that on that day also, we would have a sacred assembly, which is what we're doing right now. And whoever does work on it shall be put to death. Think of this. The first order that Adonai says is the Sabbath. That the Sabbath, actually, last week we talked about the Vishamru, and you shall guard the Sabbath. Well, think of it. A second Parsha, right after the other one, the Vishamru, says the same thing. The Sabbath is of vital importance. The Sabbath is not like Sunday church. Don't make the Sabbath like we used to follow Sunday, where, we would go to church for the Sabbath hour or the Sabbath 45 minutes. And then after that, go buying and getting our restaurants. Denny's is filled, and you could actually go to restaurants today and figure out what denomination they're from, because at the time that this denomination that's when it gets filled up. Then they start leaving. The last to leave, the restaurants with the last to leave people are the Pentecostals. They usually, have a lot of praising and worship, and then after that they go out to eat. But we all used to do that. Sabbath is not like that no more. Don't make the Sabbath into what used to be Sunday. The Sabbath is from Friday night to Saturday night in our calendar today, the secular calendar. And we cease from labor. We cease from everything. And then on that day, we have a sacred assembly. And then we go home and again continue the rest for Yahweh. For Yahweh. It also says, you shall not make a fire on that day. And by that, some people say, well, you can't turn on a light or you can't turn on a car because that causes a spark of fire. You can't do that. Well, what that actually means is you will not initiate a fire on the Sabbath. Now, today, fire, electric, all that is there. In those days, to start a fire would take a lot of time. You'd have to go get the wood, chop the wood. In fact, one guy they stoned him to death because he was out there chopping wood and starting a fire on the Sabbath. You don't do that. And so make sure you really, really keep the Sabbath. And again, the old saying that we've mentioned before is not so much that Israel keeps the Sabbath. The Sabbath has kept Israel. The Sabbath has kept Israel as a group. The Sabbath should keep us here as a group. Should keep the believers. And by the way, this is a sign, the Vishamru says. The Sabbath is a sign between me and you. How does Adonai know who are his people? The ones that keep the Sabbath. That's what it says. And again, if you don't keep the Sabbath, are you his people? Yeah, you are. Is it a sin not to keep the Sabbath? Yes. Is it a sin to keep Sunday? No. You could keep Sunday. By the way, you could keep Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday if you want. You could worship, praise, study the Word any day of the week. You could have Bible studies. You could have Sunday school, Monday school, Tuesday school, anytime you want. You could do that whenever you want. But is it a sin not to keep the Sabbath? And I would say because of this verse, that's capital punishment from Adonai's point of view. So let's keep the Sabbath. Again, the purpose of the Sabbath was a creation week gift for mankind. Yeshua said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is master also of the Sabbath. But if Yeshua wanted to exchange the Sabbath for Sunday, he would have done it here. But notice that he doesn't take it away. He's the master of the Sabbath. Why? Because the Sabbath was made for man. Man was made on the sixth day, male and female. Adonai performed the first wedding. They were married. And on the Sabbath was their honeymoon, if you will, was on the Sabbath. And that Sabbath was made for mankind, for Adam. Adam means mankind. The Sabbath was made for all men. For the Jews? No. For Israel? The Hebrews? For Christians? No. For mankind. All mankind should keep the Sabbath. The Sabbath is given to mankind. It was a gift for mankind. By the way, many people look at the Sabbath queen. Oh, the Sabbath is the queen. We got to serve the queen. No, the Sabbath is not the queen. The Sabbath is the servant. Adonai gave the Sabbath to serve you as a gift to you, not for you to serve it. Do not serve the Sabbath. Allow the gift of the Sabbath to serve you and bring you the rest, the comfort, the time of fellowship, the time of study, the time of praise that Adonai gave it. Every Sabbath is a holy day, a holiday, if you will. It's a holiday. In fact, I wrote a little tune to that. I would sing it to you, but I better not. I'll get in trouble afterwards. Like Biden, I'll get in trouble. I don't want to get in trouble. I won't sing. But it's a holiday. It's a holiday for you and for me. It's a holiday that Adonai has given us so that we could rest. We'll stop here. Here's where Elder Jim will start. And let's go ahead and stand before Adonai. Father, allow the information that was gleaned today. Allow this information, Father. To some it might be old information. To some it might be new information. To some, Father, it might be information that they're not sure about. But I pray that everyone, as the synagogue in Berea, would search the scriptures to see if these things be so. And as I have given this information and these words, may they be treasure, as your word is always diamonds and gold, a treasure full, your Torah that has been given to us. We give you honor and glory, Father, in Yeshua's name. Yeverechecha Yahweh vayishmerecha. Ayir Yahweh panav elecha vichunecha. Asa Yahweh panav elecha vayesem lecha shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance around you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day.
Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries. Thank you for joining us on our channel. If you have enjoyed this teaching and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so that you can be notified when we have new videos. If you would like to support Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries, please visit us at olivetreefellowship.com or TorahUnleashed.org. We thank you for your past support and hope to continue with you. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day.